There's a quiet ache that many people carry, one that rarely shows up in dramatic moments or emotional breakdowns. Instead, it lives in the spaces between your breaths, in the way you second-guess yourself before speaking, in the way you offer more than you receive, hoping someone will finally see the effort you never mention out loud. Feeling unloved isn't always about the absence of love, it's about the absence of certainty. The uncertainty of wondering whether you truly matter, whether your presence makes a difference, whether anyone would notice if you stopped trying so hard. That uncertainty becomes its own kind of heaviness, shadow that follows you into conversations, relationships, and quiet nights when the world feels far away and your thoughts feel too close. Most people think feeling unloved starts in adulthood. Maybe after a heartbreak or a friendship that faded without explanation. But the truth is, this feeling begins much earlier, long before you had the language to describe it. Childhood is where you first learned what love looked like, not from books or movies, but from tone, attention, safety, and consistency. Love to a child isn't a philosophical idea, it's a rhythm. It's the rhythm of being noticed, being comforted, being accepted without needing to perform. But if that rhythm was interrupted, if love felt unpredictable, inconsistent, or conditional, your nervous system learnt something long before you understood it. I must do something to be loved. Maybe you were the child who brought home good grades, hoping someone would finally be proud. Maybe you were the child who learned to stay quiet, to avoid conflict. Maybe you were the child who tried to make everyone else happy because that was the only time you saw warmth in the room. That's where the first crack forms, not because you were unloved, but because love didn't feel steady enough for your heart to rest. This early emotional wiring doesn't disappear with age. It simply transforms. As adults, people start carrying those same unseen patterns into their relationships, friendships, and even their workplaces. When someone doesn't reply quickly, it triggers a familiar fear. When someone pulls away, even for a moment, a small part of you whispers, "What did I do wrong?" You begin to analyze your worth through the lens of how others respond, not realizing that this script was written long ago, in a time when love felt like something you had to earn rather than something you inherently deserved. Feeling unloved, then, is less about the present and more about old echoes. It's not always about the people around you now. It's about the emotional blueprint that was shaped when you were too young to question it. And that blueprint becomes a filter through which everything passes. Even when people care about you, even when they show up, even when they value you, the child inside might still say, "But what if they stop?" That fear of losing love often becomes more powerful than the love itself. And because of that fear, many people start performing emotionally without realizing it. You become the listener, the giver, the peacemaker, the one who shows up for everyone but quietly prays someone will show up for you with the same intensity. You convince yourself that your needs are too heavy, too inconvenient, too much. You downplay your feelings, soften your truths, and hold back your disappointments because you fear that honesty might make you harder to love. But suppression doesn't create connection, it creates distance. Not from others, but from yourself. Over time, you begin to confuse being needed with being loved. You start thinking that if someone depends on you, it must mean you matter. But dependency and love are not the same. One comes from convenience. The other comes from connection. And when you mistake the two, you end up giving more than your soul can carry, hoping that effort will eventually translate into affection. The irony is that the people who feel the most unloved are often the ones who give love in the purest way. They understand longing intimately. They understand emotional hunger. They understand what it feels like to be overlooked, so they do everything in their power to make sure others never feel that same pain. But in doing so, they often forget themselves. They forget that love has to flow both ways to feel safe. They forget that giving endlessly doesn't guarantee receiving. They forget that people who genuinely love you won't let you lose yourself in the process of caring for them. Feeling unloved also shows up in subtle habits people never talk about. How you interpret silence as rejection. How you apologize for things that aren't your fault. How you fear asking for reassurance because you don't want to appear needy. How you convince yourself that you should settle for the bare minimum because at least it's something. These habits aren't flaws, they're coping mechanisms. Protective strategies your younger self created to survive emotional inconsistency. Psychologists call this attachment conditioning. It's the shaping of emotional expectations based on early experiences. If you had to earn affection, you'll chase it. If you are ignored, you'll overcompensate. If love felt unpredictable, you'll cling to certainty even when it comes at the cost of your peace. And without awareness, these patterns repeat themselves in different phases, different relationships, different lifetimes of longing. But here's where the real cause becomes clear. Feeling unloved isn't just an emotional state, it's a learned perception. A perception formed when you were too young to know that love should never feel like a test. A perception that makes you interpret neutral moments as neglect and small disappointments as proof of unworthiness. A perception that makes you believe you're hard to love, not because it's true, but because your emotional history taught you to expect abandonment more than acceptance. Yet, even with these patterns, the deepest truth remains unchanged. You were never unworthy of love. You were never too much. You were never invisible. You were responding to the emotional environment around you, shaping yourself to survive it. And survival doesn't make you flawed, makes you human. But understanding this is only the beginning. Healing begins when you finally start questioning the original script. You begin to realize that the feeling of being unloved isn't a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of the emotional world you adapted to. And once you see that, the story begins to shift. You start noticing all the ways you've been carrying outdated beliefs into a life that no longer requires them. You notice how quickly you assume someone is disappointed in you, even when they aren't. You notice how you give explanations for things that need no explaining. You notice how you brace for rejection, even in safe moments. These small patterns reveal something important. It's not the present rejecting you. It's the past echoing through you. Because when love feels scarce in childhood, your brain learns to anticipate emotional danger. Not because you were unloved, but because the consistency you needed wasn't always there. And the brain, being the protective organ it is, forms assumptions to keep you safe. It assumes distance means disapproval. It assumes silence means abandonment. It assumes your needs might push people away. And with enough repetition, those assumptions become automatic. You don't question them, you live through them. That's why feeling unloved can show up even in supportive relationships. Someone might care deeply for you, but your internal script might whisper, "What if they stop?" The heart becomes cautious, hesitant, always preparing for the possibility that love might slip away the moment you become too real. So instead of relaxing into closeness, you stay alert. You try to predict mood changes. You analyze tone. You watch for signs that someone is pulling back. And without meaning to, you exhaust yourself emotionally, trying to prevent a loss that may never come. This emotional hyper-awareness often gets misinterpreted. People might see you as overly sensitive or too careful, but they don't understand that for you, connection was something you had to monitor closely since you were young. You learned early that emotional safety wasn't guaranteed. So now your mind is constantly scanning for evidence to confirm you're still valued. And when that evidence doesn't show up in the way you expect, the familiar ache returns. But here's the subtle truth that changes everything. Feeling unloved doesn't come from a lack of love. It comes from a lack of feeling emotionally safe enough to receive it. You can be surrounded by people who care and still feel that internal emptiness because your emotional system learned to protect itself more than it learned to trust. And trust, especially emotional trust, isn't something your mind can force. It has to be relearned slowly, gently, through new experiences that contradict old beliefs. The real cause behind feeling unloved is the quiet belief that love must be earned. This belief is so deeply rooted that you might not recognize how often it shapes your actions. You might stay in relationships long after you feel unseen because your mind whispers, "If I try harder, maybe they'll love me the way I need." You might bury your feelings because you fear expressing them will make you a burden. You might give endlessly, hoping your generosity will finally convince someone to choose you. And when none of this works, you turn inward, assuming the problem must be you. But the problem was never you. It was the emotional conditions you grew up in. Conditions that taught you to associate love with performance. Conditions that made you confuse approval with affection. Conditions that made you believe your worth depended on how useful, pleasing, or perfect you could be. When you carry these conditions into adulthood, you end up in emotional dynamics that mirror your past. You try to fix people who can't offer real connection. You hold on to relationships that drain you because the emptiness feels familiar. You chase people who give you crumbs because receiving crumbs is something your younger self learnt to accept. And even when someone loving enters your life, you might question them. You might doubt their intentions. You might wonder what they truly see in you. Not because they're untrustworthy, but because love that doesn't require performance feels foreign. It challenges everything your emotional history taught you. And sometimes, the unknown feels scarier than the painful familiar. Feeling unloved is also tied to the way people perceive themselves. When you've internalized the idea that love is conditional, you become hyper-aware of your flaws and blind to your strengths. You notice every mistake, every insecurity, every perceived shortcoming. Believing these imperfections make you less deserving of affection. But the truth is, the people who genuinely love you don't weigh your worth against your flaws. They see your humanity, not your performance. The problem is that you might not see yourself that way yet. This is why the journey toward feeling loved again begins internally. It begins with understanding your own story instead of blaming yourself for the emotions your younger self carried alone. Because once you acknowledge the emotional patterns you inherited, you gain the power to rewrite them. You start noticing when you're interpreting neutrality as rejection. You start recognizing when your anxiety is based on old memories, not current reality. You start questioning the belief that your worth depends on how well you fulfill other people's expectations. And slowly, you begin shifting from emotional survival to emotional presence. Instead of performing, you begin expressing. Instead of shrinking yourself to be accepted, you begin showing up as you are. Instead of assuming you're unlovable, you begin asking whether the environments you've been in were capable of offering the love you needed in the first place, healing the belief that you're unloved. doesn't mean forcing yourself to feel confident. It means creating emotional conditions inside yourself that reflect the kind of love you've always longed for. Steady, patient, compassionate, and real. It means giving yourself the reassurance you needed as a child, not because you're weak, but because those early emotional wounds left imprints that deserve attention. Feeling unloved becomes less overpowering when you realize that your worth has never depended on who stayed or who left. It has never depended on who praised you or who overlooked you. Your worth existed long before anyone else had the chance to recognize it. You begin to understand something profound. Feeling unloved wasn't created by a lack of love around you. It was shaped by the lack of emotional nourishment your heart needed at critical moments. And those moments stay with you, shaping the way you interpret the world long after they've passed. But the story doesn't end in those memories. It evolves as you do, with every new insight, every new moment of awareness. You start to reclaim pieces of yourself that were lost in the years you spent trying to earn what should have been freely given. This shift doesn't happen dramatically. It happens quietly, almost gently, like a soft realignment inside you. You start paying attention to the way people treat you, not from a place of insecurity, but from a place of clarity. You begin to notice which relationships drain you and which relationships feel grounding. You start recognizing when you're overextending yourself and when you're abandoning your own needs for the sake of maintaining peace. And somewhere in this awareness, you realize something you may have missed your entire life. Love isn't something you chase. Love is something you experience when you're safe enough to be yourself. That safety begins internally. It begins with giving yourself permission to stop performing, to stop adjusting your personality to match what you think others want, to stop apologizing for your needs. It begins with allowing your emotions to exist without judging them as too much or not enough. This internal acceptance becomes a foundation, one that slowly replaces the old belief that you must earn your place in someone's life. And as this foundation strengthens, you begin to see yourself differently, not as someone waiting to be chosen, but as someone who chooses deliberately, consciously, and confidently. The truth is, you are not unloved. You are unfolding. You are unloved. You are understanding where your fears come from. And in doing so, you're breaking patterns that have followed you silently for years. Feeling unloved used to define your emotional landscape, but now it becomes something else, a window into your past rather than a prediction of your future. And as this shift continues, you might notice a surprising transformation. Relationships that once felt confusing begin to make sense. Patterns that once felt painful begin to lose their grip. You stop trying to decode mixed signals because you understand that real love isn't confusing. You stop investing in places where your effort goes unnoticed because you realize consistency is not too much to ask for. You stop accepting emotional crumbs because you finally understand the fullness you deserve. You also begin to see that not every connection is meant to be deep. Some people can only meet you at the level of their own emotional development. They may care, but they may not have the capacity to love in the way you need. For the first time, this no longer feels like a reflection of your inadequacy. It feels like a simple truth of human nature. People love according to their wounds or their healing, but their limitations were never yours to carry. This clarity frees you. It allows you to choose relationships that feel reciprocal, grounding, and emotionally honest. It encourages you to seek out people who value your presence without requiring you to bend or break to be accepted. It teaches you that the real cause of feeling unloved wasn't a shortage of love in the world. It was a shortage of environments where your authenticity was welcomed without conditions. That realization becomes a turning point. You begin nurturing your emotional world the way you once wished others would. You speak to yourself with more compassion. You comfort your own fears. You give yourself the patience you once offered freely to others. And in doing so, you create an internal stability that no longer depends on someone else's validation. This is where emotional maturity deepens, not in perfection, but in presence. You still desire connection, but you no longer crumble without it. You still appreciate love, but you no longer chase it from people who can't offer it consistently. You still feel moments of longing, but those moments no longer dictate your worth. Instead, they guide you toward understanding yourself more deeply. Because longing doesn't mean you're unloved. It means you're human. It means you have a heart capable of connection, empathy, and depth. It means you value closeness. And valuing closeness is not a weakness, it's a strength. But it's a strength that becomes powerful only when you're no longer seeking proof of your worth from others. As you grow into this awareness, something else shifts. You begin to see your own presence differently. You start to recognize the quiet ways you bring warmth into a room. The way your empathy comforts others. The way your sensitivity allows you to notice what others overlook. You begin to see that the parts of you that once felt like burdens are actually sources of depth and beauty. They were never the reason you felt unloved. They were the reason you felt everything so deeply. And maybe, for the first time, you begin to understand that love isn't measured by how desperately you seek it. It's measured by how gently you allow it to enter your life. When you stop searching for love from places that cannot offer it, you make room for the kind that can. And when that happens, feeling unloved slowly transforms into something softer, a memory of who you once were, not a definition of who you are now.